Natural disasters are always gripping news. Earthquakes, floods, hurricanes, forest fires always capture our attention and make up a good part of attention getting on the news. For a brief time, they're a major focus, but rarely do we have an opportunity to see the hard work of rebuilding that takes place after the disaster has passed. Lives, homes, businesses, and whole communities are often repaired and revived, but the actual impact on us is not the same. Step 9 is similar to the repairs and rebuilding that take place after a disaster. The difference is that we are part of the entire event. Through the process of making amends, we begin to make restitution and mend the damage of our past. In step 8, last week, that Scott spoke about, we surveyed the damage and made a plan. Step 8, again last week, says, made a list of all persons we harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Now in step 9, we step into action. Other more qualified and experienced people, like our pastor Scott Bradley, and like Pete Mandel, and like Dana German, have gone before me and done an excellent job sharing in this series of stepping into spirituality. They did steps 1 through 8. And in previous steps, we have seen how the powerlessness and unmanageability of our lives caused havoc and chaos. Our commitment to face our character flaws in step 4, to admit them to others in step 5, and to ask God for their removal in step 7 has been a humbling experience for us. In steps 8 and 9, we move forward with the final stage of cooperating with God in rebuilding our character by making amends or restitution. Just out of curiosity, how many of you have been or are in recovery and are familiar with step 9? Very cool, very cool. So when you start sleeping today, just dream about a day when everybody will be able to know about this and put it into practice. Step 9, and you can say it with me if you want, says, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Step 9 completes the forgiveness process that began in step 4 and fulfills our requirement to reconcile with others. We are ready to face our faults, admit the degree of our wrongs, and to ask for forgiveness. Accepting responsibility for the harm done can be a humbling experience because it forces us to admit the effect, the negative effect that we have had on others. By the way, most of this information in the message today comes from the 12-step spiritual journey, step 9. But before going any further, I want to stop and read a story in the Bible about making amends. In Luke chapter 19, 1 through 9, it says, Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, he could not see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this and began to mutter, "He's gone to be the guest of a sinner." But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, "Lord, look, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost." Now, just a quick note about tax collectors in that day and that culture. Tax collectors were not like the wonderful people we have working at the IRS in our country today, one of whom is our dear sister with us today. But, I won't tell them your name, but in that day, in that culture, tax collectors were Jews who worked for the enemy occupier of their land, the Romans. And the Romans took these Jews who were willing to work for them in collecting taxes and said, "We don't care what you charge the people as long as we get our share." And so it was very common for the tax collectors to charge exorbitant rates and get wealthy off of it. So the tax collectors were not only seen by the Jewish people as greedy, they were seen as traitors to their own people for making a profit off their people through their enemy. So they were really, really looked down on. But what did you notice about the amends or the restitution that Zacchaeus made? What did you notice? You already started sleeping, and the Bible thing was supposed to be the new thing that you don't know. What did you notice about the restitution he made? That's what I heard. Well, he went above and beyond, didn't he? He went above and beyond. Did he have to? Is it recorded that Jesus commanded him to do that? No. But as a brand new disciple or student or mentee of Jesus, Zacchaeus already had some level of understanding that to be a follower of Jesus means we have received God's gift of grace, and now we can be God's agent of grace to others. Part of his growth as a new follower of Jesus was being a blessing to others. Let's remember that. And we'll talk more about the results of successful amends in a few minutes. Let's remind ourselves as we start that step 9 is not about just making an apology. It's about doing our part to make things right. In fact, it can be helpful to ask the person to whom we are making amends, the person we harmed, how can I make this right? There are 3 basic kinds of amends you can make. The first one is direct amends. Turn to the person next to you and say, direct amends. These are the amends that we make personally to those we've harmed. These people include family members, friends, creditors, co-workers, and maybe others. We schedule appointments and plan to meet personally with them. If physical distance is a problem, we can call them on the phone or write a letter. The amend includes sharing with them that we are in a program that has helped us understand the need to make amends. Now, some people phrase it like this: I'm in a program where I have to make amends. I don't recommend phrasing it in that way. It tends to minimize the sincerity of what you're doing. but to phrase it in a way that shows them or communicates you're serious, you're sincere, you really mean it. And even to say this, may I have your permission? Is it okay to make amends? And then we share our amends, or we make restitution without blaming them. Without saying, yeah, you know I was wrong and I want to try to do something to make it right, but you were wrong too. That kind of defeats the whole thing, because it's not just about making an apology. It's about making it right. The second kind of amend is indirect amends. Turn to the person next to you and say, indirect amends. Indirects are non-personal amends we make to those we have harmed. These include people that are deceased, whose location is unknown, or for some other reason is inaccessible. Maybe the last time you saw them, they said, if I ever see you again, I'll kill you. It could be those people. We can make indirect amends to those people through letters that we write to them, but we do not send. Maybe we write them and afterwards we burn the letter or throw it away. But that's one way that it can be done. Another way it can be done is just through talking to God about it and saying, I wish that I could, but I know that I can't. And so I'm just going to trust you to somehow communicate to them, whether they're there or here, that I wanted to make amends. Or you might do a kindness to somebody who's related to them. And they might know about it, or it might even be anonymous. But there's a third kind of amends, and that's amends to self. Turn to the person next to you and say, amends to self. Good job. The one person that we have often harmed the most is ourself. The amends process would not be complete without taking some time and some focus to set things right within ourselves. One of the best suggestions, one of the best ways to do this is write a letter to yourself. Write a letter to yourself, making it very clear what you did against yourself, and making it very clear what, with God's help, you want to do to make that right. And I would just say here, for this and for anything in life, there are three words that I try to avoid. Would've, could've, should've. Because would've, could've, should've do not deal with reality. What I like to say is, this time I will, or next time I will. Because that deals in the realm of reality and something you can do something about. The other language is really the language of the enemy that brings us more shame, more paralysis, and keeps us from moving forward. And you might want to write this letter to yourself and read it out loud in front of a mirror. Notice that step 9 also allows an exception. Except when to do so would injure them or others. Step 9 provides for those people to whom we can make only partial restitution, because complete disclosure would cause harm to them or others. These people may include ex-spouses, spouses, ex-partners, former business associates, or friends. We must analyze the harm they would suffer if complete disclosure was made. This is especially true in cases of infidelity. In such situations, irreparable damage could occur to all parties if a direct amend were made. Even if the matter must be discussed, we should avoid bringing harm to third parties. Amends for infidelity can be made by concentrating sincere affection and attention on persons to whom we have made loving commitments. There are other situations where amends could result in serious consequences. In cases involving potential loss of employment, imprisonment, or alienation from one's family, we need to weigh the consequences carefully. If we delay our amends merely out of fear or nervousness or anxiety, we will ultimately be the ones to suffer. But in these situations, we can seek outside guidance from a counselor, a minister, or a close friend to decide how to proceed. Otherwise, we will delay our growth and also experience stagnation in our progress toward building a new and healthier life. Also, it's important to note that there are amends that require deferred or delayed action. It is wise to seek counsel in situations like this, and it's seldom advisable to abruptly or hurriedly approach an individual who still suffers deep harm from the injustices we have done. In situations where our own pain is deeply embedded, patience might be the wise choice. Timing is important. That's not just true here, it's true in so many areas of life. The content of God's will is important, but the timing of God's will is just as important as the content. Our ultimate goals are reconciliation and personal growth. Recklessness and haste might cause further injury. Right now, I want to make two very important points about making amends. Number one, this is going to be a duh moment. Making amends is often very difficult, requiring much courage. And it is very humbling, requiring prayer, meditation, and seeking wise guidance from others. Making amends is difficult enough on its own, but there are also some common obstacles we face when making restitution. Procrastination is one of those. We tell ourselves out of fear, the time is just not right. Oh, it's just not right. I'm waiting for the perfect time. I'm waiting for a better time. In this case, courage is what is required to help us face this obstacle. Joshua 1:9 helps me here. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. For the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Another obstacle is the temptation to let bygones be bygones, or see it as water under the bridge, or not wanting to rock the boat because everything seems to be okay now. And by okay, we mean silent. We rationalize and fantasize that making amends is not really necessary. If you want to overcome this obstacle, support from others and learning to put God's will above our own will can be helpful in overcoming it. The qualities we need in order to work step 9 effectively are available from God. He can give us discernment and careful sense of timing, courage, and stamina that we need to accomplish this task. As we become more courageous, it will become easier and safer to talk honestly with God about our past behavior and admit to others that we have caused them harm. But the second thing I want to say about making amends, and this might be the most important thing you hear today, we make amends not because it guarantees the response we want from the injured person, but because it is the right thing to do. The way of Jesus is almost never the easy way or the way that guarantees others will agree with us. However, it is always the best way, the healthiest way, the right way. We can make the choice to follow him in his way no matter what other people decide, no matter what other people choose to do. And that is what he calls us to do as followers of him. Last week, Pastor Scott gave a great and powerful story of reconciliation or of seeking apology. It was a story about his own father, who was a serial adulterer, a violent man who spent many years in prison for manslaughter and other violent crimes, and many other things. And it was a very powerful story that I won't retell today, but I really encourage you, if you weren't here, look at the video online on the church YouTube page. But I'm going to tell you a different kind of story today that I read this week, and it's not a real powerful one about the results of apology and reconciliation. The guy who tells this story says, the first amends I made were to a restaurant where I used to work. In my head, I was expecting to get relief from making the amends. I wasn't thinking about what I could do for my former boss. I was only thinking about how I was going to feel coming out of it. Because I was expecting a spiritual experience. And I was all excited about how it would make me feel. My sponsor drove me to the restaurant, and I was really nervous. I was wicked scared. I had stolen money from this guy. I was his head chef. He had me running the kitchen. He trusted me to the point that he would ask me who he should hire and who he should fire. He even asked me if someday I would want to start up another business with him. He liked me a lot, but I stole money from him. I shot dope in the bathroom. I stole booze from him. I called in sick a lot because I was going to buy dope. I told him that I had a prostate infection and then used related excuses to that lie often. I'd call him up and say, I can't come in. I'm in Boston at the doctor's and they want to do some tests. When I had applied for work there, he had said he didn't really need anybody. But I convinced him to hire me by talking about how I was in recovery. I talked about all this stuff to him about the steps, and I was still getting loaded. When he hired me, he said, I'm only hiring you because you've been so honest with me. We pulled up to the restaurant. It wasn't open yet, but I saw his car was there. My sponsor said, just keep praying. When I opened the front door, he was standing there, right in front of me, and he was a pretty big guy. I said, hi, Ed. He shook my hand, but didn't say anything. So I said, as you know, Ed, I'm a drug addict and an alcoholic in recovery. I have to do certain things to get better, and one of those things is to right my past wrongs. I've wronged you. I stole from you. I used drugs on your premises. I drank on your premises. I was a bad employee. If there's anything I can do to make this better, I'd be more than willing. He just looked at me and said, Ari, there isn't anything you can do to make this better. I don't care about the money. You came here and you lied to me from the beginning. You broke my trust. You stole from me. My son looked up to you as a big brother. And he went on and on. He said, we are not friends anymore. I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to see you, and that's it. Then he asked me how my parents were, and I said, good. And he said, good. Now get out of here. I walked out of there feeling really bad, and I went to the car where my sponsor was all smiles and asked, how'd it go? I said, it sucked, dude. He told me to get lost. we talked, and my sponsor told me that I went in there with the wrong attitude. He said, this process isn't about you anymore. You went in there expecting to feel good, and that's not what this is about. You're supposed to go in and try to make the other person feel good. And I read another story this week. I'm not going to say the whole story, but it was about a woman who was in recovery on step 9, and she had called a past party friend to make amends. But before she could even get out her request over the phone, the party friend said, oh my gosh, don't tell me this is one of those amends type of calls. Please, just let me, look, I heard you're sober and that's good, but this just isn't something I'm up for. Click. Romans 12:18 says, if it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. But there are going to be times, my brothers and sisters, where it's not possible because you've done your part and the other person isn't willing to do theirs. There are going to be times when you want to make amends and they don't. There are going to be times when you want to be forgiven and they're not going to choose to forgive you. But we do it because it's the right thing, not because of the results that are anything other than obedience to God and His way. And that needs to be good enough for us because we are followers of Jesus, not followers of people. I want to close with a couple of practical suggestions when you're in the process of making amends. Number one, take time to pray and meditate, asking God to give you the right attitude of heart as you do this. And the right attitude of heart would include loving and forgiving yourself and the person to whom the amend is being made. It would include being careful not to blame the person with whom you're making amends and taking responsibility for what you're going to say. Being willing to accept the consequences, whatever they are, resisting the desire for a specific response from the other person, and being willing to turn your anxieties over to God. Second thing, prepare a schedule listing the persons you're going to contact. Number 3, write down what you will say. Number 4, write down how you will say it. Number 5, write down when you will say it. And number 6, practice. Practice doesn't make perfect, but practice makes progress. Writing letters and making phone calls are acceptable ways of making amends if face-to-face is not possible. Sometimes meeting a person face-to-face may not be the most helpful approach. The important thing is make the amend before it's too late. Has anybody here ever intended to make an amend, but you waited and then it was too late? Anybody? Yeah, quite a few of us. If you need to make amends with yourself, try writing a letter to yourself, as we said earlier. What are the results? The results of successful amends include having the potential to improve our relationships with those we have harmed, promoting better relationships with others now, helping us to live with a better self-image, removing barriers in our spiritual growth, and most importantly, bringing glory and praise to God. In conclusion, steps 8 and 9 help us repair the past. Through these steps, we take responsibility for causing injury to others and do what we can to make restitution. We have a chance to redeem ourselves for past misdeeds by making amends, and we can look forward to a healthy and rewarding future life. We are now able to rebuild our self-esteem, achieve peaceful relations with ourselves and others, and live in harmony in our own personal world and with God. As a follower of Jesus, like Zacchaeus, we have received God's gift of grace. Now, we can be agents of God's grace to those we have wronged, whether they choose to accept our amends or not. As the worship team comes back up, let's pray together. Lord, as Eric mentioned earlier, this is not a popular subject because it's a difficult subject, but it is an important subject, and it is one to which you call all of those who claim to follow you to give consideration to and to make application of. So my prayer today is that you, by your Spirit, will help us to do the right thing. Whether there's somebody we know right now to whom we need to make amends, or if it happens in the future, help us to remember living in this way of making amends and restitution is part of living in the way of Jesus. And help us to trust you to help us do it. In Jesus' name, amen.